Malcolm is one of the smartest kids we've ever seen in a sitcom. But how smart is he actually? Today, I'm gonna go over 8 moments from the show that show us the genius of Malcolm. We have to start at the beginning. Caroline, the Krellboyne teacher, runs a full evaluation on Malcolm and then announces at the family dinner table that this kid has an IQ of 165. Just to give that context, average IQ is around 100. Anything above 145 is generally considered genius territory, and Einstein is estimated to have been around 160. Malcolm is scoring above that as a chaotic middle schooler with zero structured support at home. He immediately starts calculating the social cost. He knows exactly what being placed in the Krellboyne class is going to do to his reputation at school. That immediate situational awareness is actually a big part of what the show spends the next 7 seasons backing up. This one sits at number 8 because it sets the table, but trust me, the table gets a lot more interesting from here. Malcolm's Krellboyne class has medieval week coming up. Malcolm wants out badly enough that instead of just faking a stomachache, he sits down and actually studies psychology so he can perform an emotional breakdown, convincing enough to get himself excused from the whole thing. Think about what that requires. Malcolm doesn't just show up and act distressed. He reads the material, learns how therapists are trained to recognize specific behavioral cues, absorbs the vocabulary, and then performs a breakdown that checks all the clinical boxes. That is a real field of knowledge absorbed and immediately applied in a practical context, which is basically what high-level problem solving looks like when you strip the academic packaging away from it. A fan pointed out the funniest layer of this moment. Malcolm was smart enough to learn enough psychology to manipulate his therapist, but never once connected that his own home life was probably more than enough to justify real therapy anyway. The smartest kid in the room couldn't see the thing everyone else could see. That is genuinely good character writing hiding inside what looks like a fun throwaway gag episode. If studying an entire academic field to dodge a school event feels like overkill, wait until you see what he does when a doctor gets his diagnosis wrong. So Malcolm ends up in the hospital with side pains. Dr. Harrison runs his test and comes back with a confident appendicitis diagnosis, and Malcolm is scheduled for surgery the next morning. Most kids in that situation just go along with it. Malcolm reads his own blood test results, runs the numbers, and figures out that the conclusion the doctor drew doesn't actually match the data. He tries to bring this up to Dr. Harrison, who immediately dismisses him as a hysterical patient. So Malcolm, facing surgery he doesn't believe he needs, writes his own lab values directly onto his body and marker, and threatens to sue the hospital if they operate on him without running the tests again. What makes this genuinely impressive rather than just dramatic is that he was right. The show doesn't let this be a false alarm where Malcolm panicked and the doctor was correct all along. Malcolm identified an error in a professional's analysis, using that professional's own data, then used the legal framework of medical malpractice as leverage to force a second opinion. That's 3 different types of intelligence working together at once, and all of it happening under real pressure with real stakes. When Herkibe takes over as the Krellboyne teacher, he immediately installs a ranking board at the front of the classroom, listing every student by their academic performance down to tiny decimal point differences. The psychological purpose is to make the kids compete against each other constantly so no one ever feels settled or secure. It works almost immediately, with students breaking down and Lloyd at one point struggling to remember his own name. Malcolm sees through the mechanism quickly, but knowing what's happening and actually being able to stop it are 2 different problems. His solution is to weaponize the Krellboyne's own obsessive relationship with numbers against the system. He gets the whole class counting to 1,000,000 by prime numbers in sequence. The whole class spirals into a collective breakdown, while Herkibe stands there watching his perfectly constructed control environment collapse in real time. Then Malcolm looks at him and says,
"You can't beat the system, but you sure can break it."
That line became a bit of a famous quote because it captures exactly how Malcolm's intelligence operates across the whole series. He finds one structural weakness and pulls on it until the whole thing comes down. That is a specific kind of strategic thinking that most adults spend entire careers trying to develop. The Krellboyne picnic episode has a bit that most people remember as a background gag, but is actually pretty extraordinary when you actually sit with it. At the picnic, Malcolm ends up performing as a human calculator for the other parents using their credit card numbers as the raw material. People hand him the card, he glances at the 16-digit number for a second, and starts solving complex math problems on the fly, using those digits as variables. Multiplications, percentages, running totals, all in real time with multiple cards while people throw increasingly complicated requests at him. What this scene is actually demonstrating is two things at once that almost never appear together in the same person. First, photographic memory, meaning Malcolm holds a 16-digit number perfectly in his head after a single glance. Second, rapid mental calculation using that stored number as live working data. If you've ever watched videos of memory championship competitors doing mental math on stage at competitions, that is the exact skill set being shown here, except Malcolm is treating it like a party trick at a school picnic, while Hal is accidentally feeding meat to vegetarians about 30 feet away.
This is meat! We're eating meat! Oh my god!
However, the next moment moves from impressive party trick territory into the kind of intelligence that keeps his whole family out of disaster. This is the one the fandom comes back to most when people talk about Malcolm's intelligence in a genuinely high-stakes context. Hal is on trial, framed by corrupt FBI agents for financial crimes he claims he didn't commit, and the prosecution has built a case that looks airtight with multiple witnesses and a documented timeline. The defense attorney doesn't know what to do with it. Malcolm is sitting in the courtroom going through the prosecution's evidence, and he notices that every single date listed for an alleged illegal act falls on a Friday. Everyone. And Hal has already admitted in court, completely casually and honestly, that he hated his job so much he stopped showing up on Fridays about 15 years ago and used to go on his own solo adventures instead. The man has 15 years of proof he was never at work on Friday, which means he provably cannot have been committing financial crimes at work on Fridays. The prosecution's entire case falls apart. Malcolm finds this by just reading the evidence carefully enough to spot a pattern that the actual defense lawyer missed entirely. That's pattern recognition under real emotional pressure in a situation where most teenagers would be completely frozen with stress. It's the clearest example in the show of intelligence being used to protect someone who actually needed protecting. And it works because Malcolm's brain just processes information faster and more completely than everyone else in the room. Malcolm gets basically forced into the Krellboyne academic competition team by Herkeby and Lois working together, which is a tough combination to escape from. At the tournament, he accidentally gets access to the answer sheets for the entire competition and discovers that cheating is rampant. Every school in the tournament is running some version of the same scheme. And then he does something that a regular smart person would never think to do. He makes copies of every answer sheet and distributes them to every single team in the competition simultaneously. So when the tournament starts, different teams are all buzzing in to answer questions before the moderator even finishes asking them, because they all have the full answer key and they're all trying to use it at the exact same moment. The whole competition publicly implodes and the cheating is impossible to hide because it's happening on stage in real time in front of everyone. The tournament collapses, the coaches get pulled into a private meeting, and the scheme falls apart in front of the whole event. Meanwhile, Malcolm's hands are technically clean because he gave the answers to everyone equally, rather than using them for himself. He found a way to blow up a corrupt system without cheating, while making sure the people running the corrupt system got exposed. A fan described it as Malcolm being not just smart, but smarter than the smartest people around him, and doing it while finding a way to take the moral high ground. That combination, the intelligence plus the ethics plus the strategy, is exactly what separates this moment from everything else on the list. But my personal pick for the most underrated proof of Malcolm's intelligence is coming up next. Herkabe's whole character across the series is built around one thing he protects obsessively: the highest GPA in the school's history, and the award that came with it. After his life collapsed, this GPA record is basically the only thing Herkabe has left. He uses it as social leverage constantly, and builds his entire classroom identity around it. So when season 7 rolls around, and Herkabe is publicly humiliating Reese in the most petty ways possible, Malcolm decides to go after the record itself. When Herkabe makes a mistake, he casually confesses to skipping PE towards the end of his senior year.
Instead of 7th period gym, I created my own AP class. While those Cro-Magnons were chasing balls and sweating like swine, I was sitting in an air-conditioned room with my tie on loose, discussing Renaissance poetry.
Malcolm then anonymously tips off the principal that Herkabe didn't meet the requirements for the highest GPA since he missed one semester of gym class and has his title revoked.
You can't do this just because I missed one stupid gym class.
What makes this the most impressive moment on the list for me personally is that it requires patience. Every other moment on this list is some version of Malcolm's brain reacting fast. This one is Malcolm understanding an adversary deeply enough over a long period of time to find the one true fact buried under years of careful concealment, and then waiting for exactly the right moment to surface it. That's patience combined with recall combined with a clear read of what actually matters to the person you're dealing with. And that combination is honestly closer to how the best lawyers and strategists think than anything you'd find in a classroom test. The show spent 7 seasons building Malcolm as someone who could see through any system, and this is where that arc pays off most completely. He didn't need to outscore Hakabe or outmuscle him. He just needed to find the truth. So that's it, folks. 8 best moments that show us how smart Malcolm was actually. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.